Hello everyone, I'm Mrs Evans. I'm one of the Senior Assistant Head Teachers here at Calderstone School. I would like to thank you for attending this Achieve and Succeed event. We have presenting for you the Key Stage 3 coordinators for the core subjects, and if you would like to get in touch with them after this event, you can do so via the email addresses available. I would like to hand you over to Mr Ratcliffe, the Head Teacher. Thank you.
Everybody. Welcome to our Year 7 Parental Engagement Evening. My name is, as you probably know, Lee Ratcliffe. I'm the Head Teacher. And my job, I guess, in this short presentation to get things kicked off, is to help you understand what it is that we are seeking to achieve through this evening and through this set of resources and through this process that we're beginning to embark upon with you as parents, with us as staff, and with your children, our students. So I'm going to try and talk you through what the point is of what it is that we are doing here. Okay. So I guess this has always been a priority for the school over the past year or two. This has emerged as one of our priorities in terms of ways in which we can improve. But if the last year has taught us anything, it is of the importance of triangulation between parents, children, and the school. And it's been clear to me that the impact of the pandemic has made it more and more clear to me that parents, and this goes without saying, it's an absolute no-brainer, parents want what is best for their child. In all sorts of ways, in terms of well-being, in terms of social skills, but also in terms of education. What parent wouldn't say that? Every parent would say, I want to support my child with their education and put them in the best place possible moving forward. And it seems logical to me that if there's a better and closer and more positive relationship between parents, children, and school, and if that triangulation is really firm, then that puts us all in a better position to support the children, the ones that matter most, as we move forward. And like I say, the pandemic has brought that into stark reality for me, that everybody wants that. We're all on the same page. But what we've heard from parents at times is we don't always know the things that we would like to know or that we need to know, or we don't have the right information at our fingertips to enable us to be the parents that can support children at home with their learning in the way that we would like. So we've had that loud and clear, and that's a priority for us moving forward. That is something that we want to be better at. We want to help parents to support their own children, so that triangulation becomes much tighter and much closer. So that's the purpose. That's the long-term aim, I guess. And we know if we do that, we'll get happier children. We'll get a more positive and a cohesive relationship within that triangulation, and that generally children will achieve more, be happier, and get better outcomes as they move through their school life. Now, I'm going to show you this. If it looks a little bit boring, for want of a better word, don't worry about it. I'm going to explain what this means, because I think this is important. If you look at the bottom of the screen there, you'll see the initials EEF, the Education Endowment Foundation, and alongside that, an organisation called the Sutton Trust, which is a charitable organisation that ploughs loads of research into what works and what doesn't work in education. And those two organisations, the EEF and the Sutton Trust, work alongside each other to publish research that people like myself spend hours reading in order to understand what it is that's effective in education. And this is a famous chart now, a famous graph amongst educationalists. I mean, it's a bit more complicated than this, but this is it in a nutshell. And what it demonstrates is that if you look at feedback there, which is in the part of the graph that is promising, what it's saying is that feedback to children from the teacher is low cost. So it's that's zero. That's about £1,000 per child. So feedback is low cost, but it's high impact. It has a big effect. And it can add really good feedback to children, can add about 10 months onto their learning. So they catch up by 10 months if they get really good feedback, and it's not costing a great deal. So it's low cost, high impact. So that's why that's pretty high in the promising section. Interestingly, really interestingly, because we do this, it suggests that ability grouping, putting children in sets, is low cost, doesn't really matter, doesn't cost you any more to put them in sets or to keep them in mixed ability groups. It's low cost, and it doesn't have a great deal of impact. It doesn't really add a great deal of value to a child's education. It doesn't really make any difference, is what that seems to be suggesting. This is really interesting. Teaching assistants. So having another adult in the room to help a child with their learning is suggesting that that is very high cost. It's one of the most costly, because obviously you're employing another adult there within the classroom, but it's actually saying it doesn't have a great deal of impact. It's high cost, low impact. And this is not just singular pieces of research that's saying this. This is what they call meta research. It's basically pulling all of these dozens and dozens and hundreds in some cases of studies from all around the country and all around the globe together and looking at what adds highest, greatest value. And of course, the interesting bit for us today, and the reason we're here, is this bit in the middle here, suggesting that parental involvement comes at a reasonable cost, but doesn't have a great deal of impact. It doesn't have a big effect size. And so it's just within the realms and towards the bottom, actually, of the it might be worth it category. Now, that cannot be contested. That is really, really firm, educational, meta research that really has a lot of weight behind it. But I'm going to contest it because nobody can tell me that having a teaching assistant within the room with a child or with a group of children, supporting them, done correctly, and that's the right bit, done correctly, utilised appropriately by the teacher, nobody can tell me that that is not worth it. It may well be high cost, but I don't accept that that cannot have high value. And I think that that's because teaching assistants are not very well used in classrooms. I think traditionally they, yes, are high cost, but they're not always effectively utilised by the teachers or the students at times to the greatest degree. So what do you do about that? Well, you do that better. And then you give it greater effect size, you give it greater impact. And I think that's the case with parental involvement. What it's suggesting there is, the research is suggesting that it might be worth it, it might not be worth it, and it doesn't really have a great deal of impact. And I'm going to disagree, and I'm going to contest that, and we as a school will disagree and contest that. We think that's because parental engagement and parental involvement is largely, by schools, done badly. So if you look at all of that meta research that has been carried out, it's quite often based on research of educational organisations and schools where parental engagement and parental involvement has just been done badly. I think if you do that well, and you have a true, proper triangulation and a real sense of cohesion and engagement, it has to be the case that that can have higher impact. And that's the plan. We're going to make sure that we can evidence over time, over a long period of time, that parental engagement with a child's education and with the school and developing that sense of cohesion can have greater impact. And that's one of the reasons that we're here today, to refute that evidence. And I think one of the reasons that some of those strategies haven't worked is that schools historically have been too keen on gaining quick wins, on sticking plasters over wounds, finding things that don't work and fixing it very quickly and then moving on, and not having a sustainable approach to an initiative. And too often, and we've done this ourselves, we've been a victim of this ourselves, too often schools have advanced the parental engagement as year 10 and year 11 and sixth form come along, but not done enough early on. And our attitude is, if we can embed this sense of triangulation early on in year 7, and it grows over time, then that will mean that we don't have to put those sticking plasters on when we reach year 10, 11 and sixth form, because there's nothing to fix. It's the solution has been in place since day one. So we're not looking for quick wins here. We're looking for a long, sustainable project that enables students to grow and develop over time. And one of the things that's been really interesting over the past year with the impact of COVID and the pandemic that we've lived through, and the remote learning that we've had to put in place, and obviously the very different, your children weren't at Calderstones at the time, but lockdown 1 and remote learning experience was very different from lockdown 2. And I guess if we had a lockdown 3 and 4, then it would just constantly evolve and look different again. We're all learning as we go through. But what lockdown has made apparent to us, and the importance of remote learning has made apparent to us, is that this concept of what we call flipped learning is something that we could utilize in the future. Now, flipped learning, that's not a new thing, it's always existed, follows this idea. So the traditional approach in learning is a child comes into the classroom, a lot of students come into the classroom, I stand up front, I am the font of all knowledge, and I explain everything to them, and I fill them up with knowledge, and then I might get them to do an assessment later in the lesson, and then I might send them home to you guys as parents to do something with that knowledge that I've given them. It might be an assessment that they do at home, it might be a piece of work, a lot of questions, a comprehension, perhaps, that basically tests at home whether they've learned what I gave them in the classroom. The problem with that is, if there's ever a time when you need to help your child with that homework activity, well, you weren't there in the classroom, so you don't know what was said. And it's been a long time since I was at school and you were at school probably. And so that makes it very difficult for you as a parent to sit down with your child and try and help them, because you didn't see the lecture, for want of that word, you didn't see the exposition from the teacher, you didn't see the explanation in the first place. Maths is a good example of that. Many of the ways in which maths is taught now are very different from the way in which I was taught maths at school, and many of the methods and the calculations that they use have changed over time. And so I'm dreading the day when my Lucy and my Amelia go to secondary school and they come knocking on my door and say, "Dad, can you help me with this?" I might not be able to. I'm not the greatest mathematician, and my concern would be I'm not there in the classroom hearing what your maths teacher is saying, so I can't then help with the task, the assessment that they've been given to do at home. That's the traditional model of learning, and that traditional model isn't favourable to parents for the reasons that I've just described. The alternative model is the flipped model of learning. And in flipped learning, it's essentially what we've had from a remote learning point of view for the past year. The child sits at home, the student sits at home, and they are given the knowledge there. And that might be through a screen, might be through a lecture that they get on the screen, it might be through watching some videos on YouTube, it might be through doing some reading. But they sit and they absorb the knowledge, they are given the knowledge there. And if they're struggling with something, well, you can watch it with them. You can watch the video with them. They can say, "Mom, Dad, I didn't quite understand what the teacher just said," or I don't quite get this part of the YouTube video. What does that word mean? And you can be watching it with them if they're struggling. And they don't have anything that you don't have. They have exactly the same knowledge and access to the resources. The difference with flipped learning is they do that bit at home, and then they come into the classroom and we do something with the knowledge. We test it, we reshape it, we evaluate things, we put it into different contexts, and we are well positioned, because obviously we've got that knowledge, we've got that exposition, we know what that lecture, what that video, what that reading contained, so we're well positioned to be able to do something in the classroom with what they should have picked up at home. Now that's the perfect model for teaching. Have the exposition at home, bring it into the classroom, and let's do something with it. And it'll make the classroom learning environment much more interesting, because you can shape activities rather than it just being listen and learn, chalk and talk. The problem with that, of course, is, as teachers, I could give you hundreds of examples over the years of this, where the child doesn't do the exposition bit at home, doesn't do the flipped learning bit at home, doesn't watch the video or do the reading, and then they arrive in the classroom and half of your class have done it and half the class haven't done it. So what you've really got to do is go back to the very beginning and make sure everybody has got it before you go any further. And that could be frustrating. I've been there with A-level students when I've said, as an English teacher, I need you to go home, I need you to read chapter 1 of Jane Eyre before we come back on Wednesday, because on Wednesday we're looking at chapter 2. Chapter 1 is out of the way, and they come back and they haven't read chapter 1. What do? I've got to read chapter 1 with them because they haven't read it. So that can be frustrating. But in an ideal world, that model is perfect because it places the right people in the right zones of comfort. My little girl is in a world at the moment where she's just watching loads of nature programs, loads of documentaries like David Attenborough, Blue Planet and things like that. And she's learning absolutely loads. And I guess that means I can watch it with her and I can learn with her. And if she's got any questions, then we can talk about it. Whereas if she'd watched those videos in school and she was coming home and asking me a question about the mating rituals of a blue whale, I would be clueless. I wouldn't be able to help her. Okay, so that's where we are. We're looking at a model moving forward of flipped learning that just changes the nature of what children do when they're at home. So today, what we're doing is we're going to try and put parents, just as a bit of an experiment, in a better position with those 3 core subjects. We're trying to understand what it is that a parent would need to know in order to make them feel more comfortable with their own capacity to support their child. And we're going to concentrate just on those main subjects to begin with, on the core subjects of English, maths and science. On the basis for the next 4.5 years, every child will do those core subjects. And if we get those right, this is a bit of a general rule of thumb. If you get those subjects right, everything else tends to fall into place by and large. So today is about beginning to put some building blocks in place for parents for English, maths and science. You don't need to worry about if you were I mean, I had a terrible experience of maths when I was at school. It was just atrocious. And I've kind of learned to appreciate and understand maths in recent years. So I'm an English specialist and I didn't really need to try in English. I was just naturally good at it. But maths and science, I had to work and I had to try, and I just didn't have a natural fluency for it. So if I went to a parental engagement evening, I would need somebody to talk me through the maths element of that, particularly at secondary school. And what some of the things that you might come across as part of these presentations and over the next few months are as follows. And we're very aware of this, that sometimes we give you information as parents and there's an assumption there that you just understand it. And of course you won't. Because why would you? Unless somebody's explained it to you from the very start. I wouldn't pretend to understand some of the work that some of you do in your businesses and organisations. If you work in the NHS, I would be arrogant enough to understand what happens in the NHS, for instance. So sometimes I'm aware that we will send home some information and some language at times that perhaps we assume that you understand and perhaps you don't. So we're going to introduce you to some of these concepts as parents so that you know increasingly where to find things, or you have some of the knowledge that your children might have at home. So in English, maths and science, we're going to talk to you about the curriculum. And the curriculum is how things are sequenced, how the content and the knowledge and the skills that children will pick up over time, how have we sequenced that over time? How have we chosen that content? Why have we chosen that content? So we'll help parents understand that. So why does this follow on from the back of this? In some subjects, that's very straightforward. It might be, not always, but it might be in history that the Second World War follows the First World War, and then studying the Vietnam War follows the Second World War. And you would understand there's a chronological sequence there. But in some other cases, it might not be as intuitive in that way. So those main subjects will begin talking to you about that. And they might use things like phrases like spiral curriculum. So they'll explain to you perhaps what they mean by some of that. This little image here is of what we call a learning journey. And that is I've just chosen that as an extract from a Year 10 learning journey. And you'll hear them talk about that. And that is something that every child has access to. And in every subject, we have a learning journey that is a map, basically. It's a roadmap through the child's journey in that subject for the full 5 years, sometimes 7 years if they stay on in sixth form. And it gives you a sense of what each topic is about. So we're looking at the curriculum maps, we're looking at the learning journey. You'll sometimes hear us use phrases like that. And it's almost like in the old days, like my mum used to stick something on the side of the fridge, my homework kind of schedule. She'd stick it on the side of the fridge so she knew which homework I had on any given night. Well, that's the kind of thing that I wouldn't stick it on your fridge, but you might have somewhere that you can refer to and go, I know that my son or my daughter next is moving on to study natural hazards in geography, for instance. It just means that you see it coming. And so perhaps if you're going on a day out and your child is studying history and they're studying the local history of Liverpool and they're studying maybe some of the buildings and the docks, maybe if you go down to the Albert Dock, then that you understanding that is coming as part of their geography curriculum or their history curriculum, that might be quite useful to you. And the other thing that you might come across quite a lot is knowledge organisers. So for each one of these topics on the journey that they have, there will be a set of knowledge that we expect them to pick up on at the end of that topic. So if, for instance, in science, they're studying photosynthesis for a particular topic, well, what are the key bits of knowledge? What are the key chunks? What are the key words and phrases? What's the key vocabulary that at the end of that topic for photosynthesis, we expect that child to be using and understand? And if you know that, if you know what that knowledge is, then you can almost, I wouldn't, but you could test them at the end of the unit and say, well, I know you've just studied photosynthesis. So talk me through photosynthesis, and you can have the knowledge organizer in front of you. So you know which language, which words, which key bits of knowledge they should have by the end of that. And for every topic, there is a knowledge organizer. So we're going to make you a little more aware of some of these things. But I felt in this opening presentation that you at least needed to know what they were in the first instance. So the objectives, the aims, are to develop this deeply triangulated approach. Deeply triangulated. So it's not just something we do now as a one-off. It's something that over time we continue to do and we embed and we talk about, and that we send you resources and have deep conversations with you about this idea of what students need to do to achieve expectations. We're hoping that we can raise your awareness of the curriculum, what demands there are in the curriculum, what the expectations of your child are, what skills they might be expected to pick up along the way. And really what we're after is just having a positive dialogue between parents and teachers. We're just aware that sometimes in schools, I think it's just a general rule of thumb in schools, the vast majority of conversations that teachers and schools have with parents tend to be negative. We've all got limited time, and more often than not, phone calls that we make quite often are a bit negative. It's all about what someone did that was bad or didn't do that they should have done. And what we want to do is to be able to, when we do get together, have really positive conversations about learning and about the curriculum and about the topics that they're studying and how we can all help each other in that regard. So that's the set of objectives. It isn't going to happen tonight. It isn't going to be done by the end of year 7, particularly given the world in which we've been living with over the past few months and the last year. But the intention is that by the time your child leaves year 11, this will just be a habit that we are all in, that we've developed this culture of understanding what, to a greater degree, to a deeper degree, what the expectations of school are, and the parents feel a greater capacity to support their child, even if it is just a case of understanding what the curriculum plan is, understanding what the learning journey looks like, and understanding from time to time what the components of those knowledge organisers are like. So like I say, that's just my introduction. It was felt important that we give you the rationale behind what it is that we are trying to do. You're our guinea pig year group moving through as a set of students and a set of parents, and we'll do this with next year's year 7 so that it becomes a habitual thing that we are doing. But really, you'll be the first cohort that we work hard at making this work for. So I hope tonight's useful for you. I hope that the resources and the materials and the other activities that we do with you further down the line prove to be useful, and hopefully we'll find ourselves having that really clear, cohesive, deep, triangulated approach over time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Ratcliffe. My name is Miss Gilbert and I am the Key Stage 3 Coordinator for Mathematics.
This presentation is going to talk to you about mathematics at Key Stage 3. It's going to give you a little bit of guidance about how we'd like positive attitudes to always be there when we talk about mathematics, and to give you some ideas about how you can do that outside of the classroom. I'm going to show you where you can find our scheme of work and how it shows you what your child is studying. I'm going to give you a bit of guidance about what our knowledge organisers look like and how you can use them. I'm going to talk to you about one method called the bar model, which can be used to answer any question for any aspect of maths. Show you the homework website that we use and just give you a bit of guidance about how it can be helpful at home if someone's struggling with some homework, and give you a bit of direction to some useful websites which you might want to have a little look at. So, modelling positive attitudes in maths. We hear this a lot, and especially on parents' evening, where people say I was never good at maths in school. And you probably were. Maybe it just was not your favourite subject, because we use maths all the time in our everyday life. So it's a really good idea that if you go to the supermarket, or if you maybe like order some pizzas, that you always have that conversation about which is the better deal. So for example, we get those buy one get one free offers in the supermarket, or maybe those 2 for Tuesday pizzas, and compare that to, is it a better deal than if we focus on something where it's buy 3 for 2. So maths comes up in life a lot, and the more conversations that we have about it, the more appealing it will be. And it's not just about getting the right answer every single time. It's about looking at a problem and being really positive and being enthusiastic and being persistent, to be able to even just tackle that problem and have a good starting point and know where to begin. Okay, so positive attitudes always there when talking about maths, so that it continues through their school career and once they leave as well. So a little bit of guidance about where you can find our scheme of work and what we use here at Calderstone. So every single student follows exactly the same scheme of work. We don't give certain students a different scheme of work. The objectives are split, so teachers understand that some students will be a bit more able on certain topics. So the objectives are split into support, core and depth. So everyone is given the core objectives, and then we know certain students could be challenged a little bit more in certain lessons, so we can give them an extra objective to achieve. Or we know that some students might be struggling with a certain topic, so we can say, okay, that's fine, we don't need to push you any further, we can stay on these objectives and we'll all still master the same topics and the same skills. The lessons are differentiated. So at the moment, Year 7 are learning a mixed ability, which is brilliant. The lessons are differentiated, so teachers are very, very aware about who needs the support, who needs scaffolding, worksheets to help them out, which students maybe would benefit from a more challenging question on a certain topic. So the lessons are differentiated. So our scheme of work, you will find it on the school website. So if you just go to the school website /maths, and it'll take you to this page, you will find the curriculum that will be studied in maths for all years whilst at Calderstone. They look like this. So down the left hand side you can see that they're split into the different terms. Generally we'd study 2 different units within a half term. So for example, students come in and we begin with our number skills, and then for the second half of that term we'll introduce them to algebra. Underneath those you can see subtitles, so you're aware of what's going to be covered in each of those units, and I'll come back to the knowledge organiser a little bit later on so you can have more detail about what is being studied. If you look at the second half of the year, we can now see that in spring term 2 we're only scheduled to study one topic. So we've got kind of this time that if a class has not mastered a topic, then we know we can kind of take a pause and reflect on some of the skills that maybe we need to recap, or if we've got an assessment coming up, we can take that time to revise. So we have got those gaps in our scheme of work where we can reflect on what we've done so far and review it so we're prepared for the next unit. So the knowledge organisers are very, very helpful as they give the students an idea about what they're going to study in each unit. Keywords are always there, which are really, really important, because if we don't know the meaning of each individual keyword, then if it comes up in a problem, we can't actually tackle that problem. So they're discussed in lessons, so that if a student doesn't know something, it can be cleared up straight away. The prior learning is also super important, because without prior learning, you can't build on top of what we've already known. So the prior learning is there. Students will always be asked kind of, do they know how to do all of these different skills? There are obviously going to be gaps in the knowledge, so I'll give you some resources and some websites to go to fill in those gaps as well. So we can use the Maths Watch video clips to remind yourself of what we already know. Then you can see underneath that you have each of those subtitles explained in a little bit more detail, so it tells you specifically what do we mean by writing a ratio, what should you be able to do. So if you are absent for that lesson, you've got your knowledge organiser to look at, and then you can go away and watch a video so that you're not going to fall behind and you can fill in anything that you haven't done. So moving on now to teacher methods. So we use a lot of different methods to teach the different topics. One method that they would have seen in primary school, and which can be applied to so many different aspects of maths, is the bar model. So I'm going to just talk through a couple of questions just to give you an idea that if your child comes home and they're stuck on a question, you can always go back to this bar and you can draw it, you can apply the question that they've got to it, and it'll be that problem solving way to help them come to that answer. Again, I'm just reassuring you that if you don't get the right answer, it's not a problem, but to make sure that you've always got that positive attitude, you've got that idea of where you could start with a problem. So for example, if I've got this bar and I'm asking you how could we represent it as a percentage, we might be thinking, okay, if I divide it into 10 equal pieces, I could divide it into 100, but maybe that would mean my parts are very, very tiny. So if I think about dividing it into 10, what would each part represent as a percentage? We know that the whole bar would be 100%, because that is the entirety. And then by dividing it into 10, we know that each individual piece would represent 10%. We'll apply this to a question a little bit later on. So if I wanted to think about how many sections would you shade to show 60%, hopefully you're thinking I would shade 6 in, because that would total to 60%. What if I then think about what fraction does each part represent? So the bar, again, is my whole. And if we think that if I split it into 10, every section is 1/10. If I shade 2 sections, what fraction have I shaded now? So considering that one part is 1/10, I'm hoping that you're thinking 2 parts being shaded in would be 2/10. And we link it to that skill now, that can you simplify that fraction? So we could think of that as being 1/5 of the whole entire bar. What if I link it back to percentages? Would you know that 2 of them being shaded in would be 20%? What if I then now link it to money? So this bar has loads of different links. So if I link it to money, so the 2 shaded sections now represent £5. How much money does the whole bar represent? So remember, every part is worth the same. So what would the whole entire bar represent? Would it be £25? Because we understand that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts of the bar, so £25. So let's put these skills to a question. So we've got the question of, our coat originally cost £45. Amy buys this coat in a 20% off sale, how much does she pay for the coat in the sale, and how much money does she save? So my bar is still split into 10 parts. So I've divided 45 by 10, and I've got £4.50. That, we know from previous questions, represents 20%, because every part of the bar is 10%, so 2 parts is going to be 20%. So she pays £36 for this coat because she saves £9, and the rest of the bar is that £36. So again, the bar is really, really helpful if we come to a question on percentages. We can link it to fractions as well. So if it was the fact that we would have 1/5 is going to be taken off the price of the coat, we can still work it out using that bar. And then we link it to ratio. We like it with ratio. So Peter and Jane, they share £40 in the ratio to 3:5. How much does Peter get? So we're thinking now the whole bar, it's not worth 100%. It's not worth one whole. We're now thinking the bar represents that £40. So if we split that £40 into 8 pieces this time, because our ratio is 3:5. 3 pieces are going to represent £15. So if we're asked what fraction of the £40 does Peter get? So Peter's going to get 3 parts, so he's going to get this £15. But if we want to know what fraction of the £40, so 15 out of 40, and again we go back to that strategy of simplifying the fraction, we're dividing by 5 both times. So the bar model is one strategy that we can apply to lots of different maths questions. So if you're ever stuck, we can always go back to that bar and see if it could help us to answer a question. Moving on to homework, and the homework website, again, it'll allow you to help with any of those questions that you can't do, but I'm just going to talk through a little bit of guidance about how we set it. So it's set every Monday at the moment, and we use a website called MathsWatch. Students will either get one short task, so majority of the time they'll get one short task to complete every single week. Sometimes teachers will offer them a longer task, but again, that might just take about 2 weeks to complete. We know the natural thing is just that you wanna help the student, but sometimes it can interfere, it can stop your child working independently, and we want students to have this autonomy. We want them to know what to do if they ever become stuck with a problem. And then the issue arises that when we were at school, that we did maths in maybe a different way, and I honestly embrace every single method that comes to answering a problem. But we know that issues arise if you have a different method of answering a question to what the students learnt in school, and it leads to maybe a little bit of conflict, which we don't want. So there are going to be times when we need you to just offer a little bit of advice and just rescue your child from maybe a problem that they cannot do, because we don't want them to become negative about the topic. We want them to always be thinking that, okay, I can find a method, I can find a way of tackling this question. So to talk through the website, and I'll show where we can find those videos to help us out. So if you Google MathsWatch VLE, you will come to this website. The username is always going to be your surname, the first initial, and 20, because our year 7 started in 2020. So for example, if it was me, my username would be gilbertm20@Calderstones. The password for everyone is the same, so the password should be Caldies. And we come to this page here. So I've just taken a screenshot of Sophie's, so you can have a little look at what actually happens. So the My Work shows you all of the different tasks that have been set, and you can see that you've got the marks that you've done, you've got it as a percentage, and you've got the dates when it's set, so you can just have a little check and make sure that they're completing all of their homework on time. If you open a task, so you click on a task, you get a clear answer box to write your answers in. If you cannot do that question, MathsWatch is brilliant because you can simply scroll to the bottom of the screen and there will always be a video there which talks you through a very similar question to the one that you're being asked to answer. So if you ever can't do something, you scroll to the bottom and there'll be a video there to help you out. The videos are also here. So if maybe you've come to a topic, you've looked at that prior learning, you think, okay, I have not done that before, or I cannot remember how to do those things. So we need to go back, we need to reflect, we need to watch videos to bring it into our memory. So if you go to the videos and you can search for anything to do with the topic. So for example, if I was coming to a topic on angles, I'd search on angles and then I can scroll down this part here and maybe just double check that I can remember how to draw angles or how to measure angles as well. My progress is really nice, so this is where we're trying to encourage students to be independent and give them the material that they need to improve their independence at their learning. So the My Progress is a really nice option here at the top where you can browse through all of the different videos or you can search for a specific video, and then if you click on the interactive questions you can answer questions based on that topic, and as you work through, these charts up here at the top start to fill in, and hopefully by the end of year 11 you would have mastered every single skill and be an excellent mathematician. All right, so those are the websites that you should be going to help you if you come to a question that you cannot do. Again, you just search for the video, you work through it. If you can't do it, don't make it into a big deal, it's absolutely fine. They've always got the teacher there to answer any questions and to help them out. Useful websites then, so I've spoken about Maths Watch. As you progress further up the school, Corporate Maths becomes a brilliant website where you can get, again, more videos, more worksheets with answers where you've got that further practice. So if there's a test coming up, Corporate Maths is a brilliant website to use. Mr. Barton Maths has lots of nice ideas and advice. There's a student section on there if you just want to have a little look at some different problems. And I know a lot of the primary schools use White Rose Maths to explore, and there's lots of very lovely questions there based on reasoning, based on problem solving, and based on fluency as well. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Miss Gilbert, for that information from the Maths Department. I'm Dr. Turner. I'm the Key Stage 3 Coordinator, and I'm going to speak to you now about science at Calderstone School.
So in the following presentation, I'm going to talk to you very quickly about how we organise things within the science department and how we can hopefully allow all of our students to achieve and succeed at the highest level and to the best of their ability. Before I start though, just a little bit of background about what the intent of the curriculum is within science. What we aim to do and what our vision is for the subject is to guide our students to become very knowledgeable in science, and we want them to become scientifically literate, and we'd like them to all to become methodical problem solvers. Now, all of these skills, as well as being linked to science, are transferable skills which can be used in all subjects and then also beyond the time here at Calderstone School. So they'll be very good for future apprenticeships, A-level courses, college courses, university degrees, and beyond into the workplace as well. We want to foster a spirit of independent inquiry. We want to try and nurture some curiosity in science, and what we try to do is to bring current, relevant, real-world science into the classroom. We're committed to raising our standards, so we're trying to promote a lifelong culture of learning, and the way we do that, we try to stimulate an interest. We want to try and make students enjoy science. We want to give them the opportunities, the challenge to achieve their potential. We do that by providing a relevant science curriculum, and we want to encourage students to ask questions. By asking questions, you learn things, and then also learning from mistakes and being involved in practical work, etc. Okay, so when we are at Key Stage 3, we begin on a learning journey, and that learning journey takes us through Year 7, Year 8 and to the start of Year 9, and within Year 7, 8 and 9 we complete the majority of the Key Stage 3 curriculum. Now that Key Stage 3 curriculum is a foundation, is the building blocks for future study in science at GCSE, which we start partway through Year 9. So it's a really, really important time for students to get the most out of the time within the classroom. Now, we organise science into 10 big ideas, and those big ideas basically cover all the fundamentals of science in both biology, in chemistry and physics. Each big idea outlines what students need to know. Okay, and this is just a subject content that they need to remember. So it could be a simple fact where they've got to remember an equation, for example, to calculate speed. Speed equals distance divided by time. The big idea within each one, they'll also be told how to apply that knowledge. So in this example, being able to use the speed equation, and also we'll give opportunities for students to extend that knowledge where appropriate. So here's an example of all the 10 big ideas which we have within science, and you can see that we have the 10 big ideas on the left hand side, starting at forces at the top, going down to genes at the bottom, and each of those big ideas is broken down into 4 smaller subtopics. So for example, forces in Year 7, they will start back in the autumn term doing speed and gravity. With Year 7 in electromagnets, they will start doing voltage and resistance and current, and they will do that within the second term. And then in Year 8, we will continue with those big ideas. So we start off with Part 1 within Year 7, and we do Part 2, the second part of the big ideas, that's normally within Year 8, and then a little bit into Year 9 as well. There is a little bit of overlap towards the ends of the years. Now, within the first term at Year 7, we look at these first 3 big ideas. So we have here forces 1, we have matter 1, and we have organisms 1. Now, forces 1 includes speed and gravity, and matter 1 is a chemistry topic looking at particle model and separating mixtures, and organisms 1 for biology looks at cells and movement. Now, to help each student when they are doing each of those topics, we have some knowledge organisers. Now, the knowledge organisers give the basic information for that topic, or that part of the big idea, and they are sent out to all parents and all carers each term. And this is an example of one of our knowledge organisers for science. It's a physics-based one for forces 1, and we can see on there it's got some of the basic information that you need within that topic. So for example, here it talks about gravity on Earth is 10 newtons per kilogram, so that's something that they need to know, they need to remember. And on the moon, it's about 6 times less at about 1.6 newtons per kilogram. We've got an equation here because science has lots of math skills in it, so we have very close links to maths. So the skills that we learn both in science and maths are both interchangeable and transferable. And so the knowledge organisers are particularly useful. They're giving basic facts. So when students are at home, they're doing homework, they're doing independent study, they're trying to revise, or within the classroom, they have something that they can refer to get some information. And here's another example of the same big idea, but it's another part of the topic. So this is about speed. And again, we can see we've got stuff that we need to know. There's an equation here. Speed equals distance divided by time. And we've got some examples of different situations, and we have all the key words that are within that topic as well. So as well as having math skills, we have to have literacy skills as well. Students need to be able to write extended response answers to questions. So again, we've got transferable skills from both maths and both the English department as well. So every big idea has its own knowledge organiser, and as I say, they are sent out, and they when we're in the classroom as well, topics, teachers will also be able to give students paper copies too. Now, following on from the first term in Year 7, so in the spring term, we move on to 3 new big ideas, and prior to moving on to these big ideas, there would have been an assessment test. So the very first assessment test is normally in early December, and in early December we assess the first 3 big ideas which we looked at previously, and then following from that we then move on to these big ideas. Now, electromagnets 1 is a very important topic, looks at current, voltage and resistance, and reactions 1 as well, particularly important within chemistry, acids and alkalis, and metals and non-metals, so looking at all the reactions that take place. And then obviously ecosystems, looking at the environment around us, plant reproduction and interdependence as well. Excuse me. Now, continuing on through Year 7, we then move into the final term, and we then look at waves and energy. So both of these big ideas are physics-based, and we look at sound and light, and we look at energy transfers and energy costs. Now, at this point here, there would be another whole school assessment. So we'd have a whole school assessment week, and we would assess all of the work that had been completed during Year 7. Okay, now in the teaching of these subjects, each student will normally have 3 specialist science teachers, 1 for biology, 1 for chemistry, and 1 for physics. However, we are all qualified to teach all 3 subjects, so but we will have a particular specialism. So for example, my specialism is both physics and chemistry, so I tend to teach mostly physics and chemistry, but all teachers can teach all subjects equally as well up to Key Stage 3. So, excuse me. So within each of the big ideas, as I say, you will be doing some biology, we're doing some chemistry and some physics, and then there are 2 assessment points throughout the year. Now, we hope that all students are going to be able to master the subject. So each big idea topic contains 4 smaller topics, as I mentioned earlier. So have a look at the waves topic here. Waves is broken down into part 1 and part 2, with sound and light in part 1 and wave effects and wave properties in part 2. Now, as we go from left to right, from sound right the way across to wave properties on the right hand side, the complexity of the topic increases. So we're using this sort of spiral curriculum. We're starting off with some of the more simpler topics, and then we're building onto something that's a little bit more detailed, a little bit more abstract, building upon the understanding that's been learnt earlier. So we do the part 1 topics within Year 7. So we give all of our students the opportunity to master those topics earlier on in Year 7 and to get a really good understanding. And then when we revisit those topics, we apply that previously learnt knowledge and we build upon it, and we give our students more of a challenge, and we give them more abstract ideas to work with. So what do I mean by mastery? Well, mastery means gaining a secure understanding of the big ideas, and understanding means both knowing and applying. Now, when we talk about knowing stuff, this is just basically being able to recall and be able to remember key facts, so you have an accurate mental structure of the concepts and skills. So you can remember things, you can recall things. And we also now need students to be able to apply that knowledge. So it's no longer good enough just to remember facts, just remembering equations, just remembering dates. You need to actually be able to do something with that information as well. So understanding means both knowing and applying, and we ensure that all of our students get an opportunity to master the subject by knowing and being able to apply that knowledge. They are very clear statements, okay, of what it means for students to know and apply. We have these mastery goals in place, and we do that by having some checklists. Now, these checklists, again, are available electronically, and they're also available in a booklet form, which we use within the classroom, and we also send those booklets home, normally at the beginning of the year or sometimes at the beginning of the topic. Now, within the checklist, we will have the key facts that students need to know. So every fact that is listed here, the students will need to know. Okay, so it will give, for example, the skills, it will give the facts, it will give the keywords. Every big idea will have particular facts, particular keywords, particular skills that those students will need to know and remember. And the checklist will actually give you that information. We also make sure that all of our students can apply that knowledge. So on each of the checklists, there's also an apply column. Now, the apply column will tell our students what they've got to do with that information. So there are some facts. So, for example, again, back to the speed equation, speed equals distance divided by time. But what can you do with that? Well, if I was to say, for example, a person ran 100 meters in 10 seconds, I could calculate the speed, where speed is the distance, 100 meters, divided by the time, 10 seconds, to give an answer of 10 meters per second. So you are learning the fact, you are learning the skill, you are learning a keyword, and then you are using it. In many situations, we will also try to extend the understanding. So some students will actually exceed the mastery goals of know and apply. So we also have an extend column on each checklist for each big idea, and that provides much more challenging objectives. Now, in all situations, the teachers will obviously provide a bespoke lesson depending upon the students that are within front of them, but they will all base their lessons, and the curriculum is all based around these 10 big ideas. It's all based around this mastery goals. It's all based around this idea of what you know, what you need to apply, and they are the mastery goals. And then also we will give as many opportunities as possible to as many students as possible to be able to extend upon those as well. This is an example of a checklist, and this is for the sound topic, which is within the waves big idea. Excuse me. And we can see here is the know section, and it gives some facts, and it gives some statements, and it gives some keywords. And as I say, these are available electronically to support students. So if they have a copy of this at home together with the knowledge organizer and they're unsure, they've got the keywords here, this is what they need to know. Okay, and this actually reflects and actually mirrors the knowledge organizer very, very closely. We also have here the apply section, and this is what students will need to be able to do. And then we have at the bottom the opportunities for extending beyond the mastery goals of know and apply. So those checklists, we have one for each part of each big idea. So there are 20 in total, covering all of the 10 big ideas. In fact, I do apologise, there are 40 in total, covering all of the big ideas. So there are 4 parts to each of the 10 big ideas. So this again is just exactly what we've looked at there, but obviously just a little bit bigger so you can see. So for example, in sound, we are talking about the fact that sounds consist of vibrations, that travelling as a longitudinal wave. Now you might not know what longitudinal means, so the student could then look at the keywords on the right hand side here, and here's the definition of longitudinal. Okay, so there's really important, useful information there to help support students as they are working through each of the big ideas. And here some facts: sounds cannot travel through a vacuum, and the speed of sound in air is 330 meters per second. Okay, so you've got the knowledge there, the things that you need to recall, the things that our students need to remember. And then we have our application. And then, as I said before, there's also the opportunity for extension. Now, these are really useful to structure revision. So the checklist, the knowledge organisers together are very, very good at the end of a topic if there's an assessment due, or even if there isn't, as students are working through a topic, it's really useful that every week they just spend maybe just a few minutes just reviewing what they've done in class that week. So in class this week, I did speed equations. I looked at the structure of a cell in biology. I looked how acids react with alkalis. And just by looking at the checklist and looking at the knowledge organiser, either electronically or on a piece of paper, students can then review what they've done. Now, if you review things 3 times, that commits it to long-term memory. So it's really important, as well as doing stuff in class, and then you're revising it and then looking at it again, then it will be committed to students' long-term memory, and then hopefully they'll be able to achieve and succeed to the best of their ability later on. Now, obviously in science, we also have to think about scientific skills, and we also have things called inquiry activities. So throughout the Key Stage 3 curriculum, we try to build upon 4 main strands of inquiry: analysing, communicating, inquiring, and solving. So we are trying to, as I mentioned earlier, make our students scientifically knowledgeable, scientifically literate, and we want them to become methodical problem solvers. So to do this, we do that independent inquiry. We will do practical work. We will encourage students to ask as many questions as possible. We will get them to analyse results, communicate their ideas, come up with questions, collect data, maybe look at theories, maybe estimating risk, doing risk assessments, etc. Together with the 10 big ideas, this is all integrated within that, and as a whole, it will allow our students to achieve and succeed at the highest of levels. Now, the big ideas and the inquiry process, as I said, ensure all of our students start GCSE courses with a level of proficiency to reach or exceed their potential. And that's what we aim to have for all of our students by the time they start that GCSE course in Year 9. Okay? Now, as well as classwork, we also have to do some homework, okay? And homework is really useful, whether it's set homework or whether it's work that a student has decided to do independently. It forms a really important role in the development and the understanding within a subject. Now, as a science department, we have invested in a platform called EduCake, and EduCake is found at the following web address here. Each student is given a username at the start of Year 7, and that username remains the same for their entire time at Calderstone School through Year 7 to 11. It's an online assessment platform. It's a formative assessment, which means that it gives our students feedback. Now, we use this for all of our science homeworks, and it also can be used for independent self-study. So it makes homework and it makes revision very easy and makes it very effective. It gives all of our students instant feedback on their homework. So after every single question, it will tell our students whether they got it right or whether they got it wrong. And it will give also the opportunity for how they to learn from their mistakes. And by learning from mistakes, we can all improve. There's also the opportunity to set yourself revision tests, so students can create revision tests themselves. They can choose the topic they want to revise. So, for example, they may have a test on plant reproduction coming up. They go into EduCake, they can set questions purely on that topic. They might have an end of year exam. They can then set, so for example, 20, 30, 40 random questions across the whole curriculum or across a series of topics. So therefore it really makes it a useful tool where students, without any need for teacher input, they can actually go and do little revision tests. They can then learn from themselves, and if they get the question wrong, it doesn't really matter. They learn from that mistake. As students use Educate over the course of year 7, 8 and 9, it will build up a picture and it will allow students to see how they're doing on each and every topic. It will show them their strengths, it will show them their weaknesses, and it gives a table with red, amber and green. So the topics they're doing really well in will show as green. The ones that maybe need a little bit of work, a little bit more revision, or in amber, and then the areas of weakness will appear in red. So what you can do, you can pick on a topic. So let's say, for example, forces topic came up as showing as red or amber. You can click on that and it automatically generates a revision test. So the student can then improve upon the topics again. So again, it's an absolutely fantastic tool to help our students. This is an example of what it looks like. So for example, here we've got a question and it comes up that normally one-word answers, or maybe pick a letter or a number. You maybe have to do a calculation and put the answer in. So here we've got a question. Electric current is the flow of electric something. What one word completes the sentence? So the student will have a think about the question, and it's really important when you are given a question. This is something that students sometimes forget to do. You need to read the question carefully. You then need to pause. And in that moment of pausing, you need to think. And once you've thought about your response, only then do you write down your answer. And that's really useful when you're using both Educate and when also doing questions in class, either verbally or if you're writing them down. So read the question, pause and think, and then write your answer. Well, the answer I'm going to write down is charge. So I'm going to submit the answer charge. So you write your answer in the box here, and then you click the submit button over here. Now, once you've submitted it, it will tell you whether you are correct, whether you're right, or whether you are wrong. Now, unfortunately, it is a computer program. Sometimes it will not pick up on spelling mistakes. So let's say, for example, I had made a spelling mistake, but it was obvious that I knew it was charge. You can always then disagree with your mark, and that will mean that the teacher will get a little question mark appear on the mark book, and then the teacher for the student's class can then go in and actually amend the mark if it is correct. Here's an example of where it's wrong. So for example, what is the name given to the rate of flow of electric charge? And the student has written in the answer voltage. Well, it then tells you that it's wrong and what the correct answer is. And then again, students can hopefully learn from those mistakes later on. So this is the sort of thing that would appear on a student's screen. It would say your teachers have set you, and it will say how many new tests there are. It will give the name of the teacher. It will give the test name. It will give how many questions there are, and it will say when it's due as well. Students can also set themselves random questions. They can set themselves tests. They can view their own test results, and they can also view the results by an individual topic. And then it also allows students and both yourselves to actually look at a report to see how you're getting on generally across the whole subject range. Now, Educate is very good at being used for homework and also for independent study and revision, but there are also other resources available as well. One of those is BBC Bitesize. Now, BBC Bitesize is a fantastic online resource. Excuse me. And if you just search for BBC Bitesize online in Google or another search platform, you'll be able to find it easily. We want Key Stage 3 Science, and obviously for England to make sure you get the correct curriculum. And then there is all the content for both biology, chemistry and physics for the whole of Key Stage 3. This is an example of what the web page looked like, and what you can see here, it's normally broken down into a section that says Revise, and that Revise this section has notes which students can read through. There's quite often animations and videos in there as well. And then when they've done that, there's a test section. Now the test section is 10 multiple choice questions. And again, a bit like Educate, answer the questions at the end. Once you submit it, it will tell you whether you've got it right or whether you've got it wrong. Absolutely fantastic. Everything's on there for both science and all subjects, not just science. So it's an absolutely brilliant resource. There are also revision guides available. So we have one of the biggest companies that produces revision guides are CGP. We do have some of these in school. Sometimes we have them as prizes for students, but we do have copies available as well. They are also available online, and they're also available in many of the high street bookstores as well. Things like the revision flashcards are particularly useful. So each flashcard has some questions for each of the sections within a topic, within each of the big ideas, and on the reverse side it's got the answers. Brilliant way of revising, normally about 4 or 5 cards per topic, so it doesn't overwhelm our students in any way. You know, you can just maybe, even on the day of a test or something, or whatever, you could just have even that little box fits in a bag, or just a few of them in your Science Blazer pocket, just a little bit of a quick sort of test with, like, by yourself, with friends on the way into school or just beforehand. Fantastic. Okay, so they're from CGP as well. CGP, if you get one of the revision guides, also give you an online version. And the online version is exactly the same as the paper copy, but some students will prefer to do stuff on the screen. You can view this on their phones. If you've got free Wi-Fi anywhere, they can have a look at this, or if they are lucky enough to have enough data, they can view it wherever they are, so on the bus into school, on the car into school, so they'll be able to access that at any moment. And that's an example of what the pages look like. Very clearly presented with all the information that's needed. So together with Educate, together with the checklist, together with the knowledge organisers, and all the information that's given in class, there's lots and lots of help there to ensure that every single Calderstone student has the opportunity to do their very best, and every single Calderstone student has the opportunity to master all of the goals in order to do the very best that they possibly can. Okay, I'm going to finish now just with a quote here from Jackson Brown, where it's the best preparation for tomorrow is doing your best today. So if our students can engage and they can just do their very, very best, and that's all anyone can ask of anybody, if you do your best, then you will be the best prepared for tomorrow. And we hope that that will lead to successful and prosperous futures for every single one of our students here at Calderstones. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm going to leave you there now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Turner. Hi everybody, I'm Mrs. Duffy, the Key Stage 3 English Coordinator. So next up we have a look at what Year 7 get up to in English.
Okay, so our objectives are to explain the curriculum we teach to Year 7 in English, to clarify how we assess your child in Year 7, and also to advise on how to support your child with their English. So you can see the image here of Calderstone's English learning journey. Obviously, that you would need to zoom in to have a look at that in a lot of detail, which is what we're going to do in a second. But you can see that the journey takes our students from Year 7 all the way through school, through their school career. Okay, so it's really important to point out that our mantra is revisiting skills in different contexts over time to make them stick. Okay, sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but all it means really is that you will see some of these icons appear in several different places, and that's because as a skills-based subject, we are continuously practicing these skills. Okay, so you can see the 3 circles there. What language and structure techniques do we find in speeches in that one, prose fiction in the one at the bottom, and in poetry, bottom left. Another example there, we've got how do poets create vivid characters, if we're looking there at poetry on the left, but also how do novelists create vivid characters Okay, so revisiting the same skills but looking at different texts. Okay, so if we zoom in on what we look at first, we can see that in Autumn 1 and 2 we look at prose fiction and the Graveyard Book. Okay, so you can see a nice picture of a front cover from the Graveyard Book there by Neil Gaiman. And our rationale behind this is that we want to begin Year 7 with a text which will engage students. Essentially, we want them to love English. We want to hook them. So we want a text that is engaging. We also obviously want them to engage with extended fiction texts. These texts are great for classroom discussions and help students to develop socially and emotionally by engaging with challenging themes such as childhood and innocence, growing up, dealing with prejudice, friendships, and ultimately as well we want to culturally enrich our students. So we look at this particular genre, which is the Gothic genre. The focus here is on students practicing responding to extracts from the text. We don't necessarily assess them formally at the end of the unit anymore. Teachers just use the time to mark their books and respond to students in the classroom. Okay. Now here's an example of a knowledge organiser in English. So this is our Graveyard Book 1. And you can see that it's ram-packed with information there. It's a way of getting all the essential information in one place. So you can see there on the left we've got key characters, we've also got key techniques and key themes. Okay, really importantly, on the back of this first one, we've got the petal writing frame. Now, we encourage our students from Year 7 to respond to text critically, and we engage them in writing essays from the very beginning. And one of the ways that we do this is we teach them how to write petal paragraphs, so how to achieve a convincing, hopefully, critical paragraph. And I won't go through this all the way through this in detail, but you can see there, step 1, we'll come up with a point. So after reading a text, we might respond and say how we feel about a particular character or what we think a particular character is up to, and we'll need to back that up. If you see, look at step 2 with some evidence. We're pulling evidence from the text, references from the text, and then working our way through, we're analysing those particular quotations, what terminology is used, what methods are used, and so on. Okay, I want to just give you a snippet from the reading mark scheme with that petal paragraph in mind. I'm not necessarily wanting to look at this in a lot of detail. Some people can find it quite intimidating with the amount of information on it. We tend to make them, a bit more student friendly when we give them to students. But just to give you a little bit of basic information about them, I've taken this from the middle of a reading mark scheme. I'm just focusing on clear understanding, so level 4. I have included level 3 there, so you can just see the difference. And I just want to explain some of the jargon, basically. Okay, so you've got AO1 and AO2. Now, AO just means an assessment objective. Okay, so if you look at AO1, what we're talking about is a clear, explained response to task and text. The difference with level 3 and level 4, if I just remove that, is for level 3 we're looking at some explained response, whereas for clear understanding, the student can clearly explain something. Okay. Also importantly for AO1 is the effective use of reference to support, so using quotations, and hence why we use that petal paragraph so that we are covering all of these AOs. AO2 is another absolutely vital assessment objective. It's used throughout the course, and students really do need to practice with this one. And AO2 is basically about looking at the writer's methods. Okay, so students can pick out certain techniques that writers have chosen to use, how writers have manipulated their writing for a desired effect on the reader, and even better if they can pull out some of the subject terminology. Some of those subject terms they will know from primary school, things like personification and similes, adjectives, and then obviously we build on that and we give them more, some of the more harder ones. Okay. Okay, so if we look at what comes next, in spring 1, we are looking at writing fiction. So it's called Words from. Okay, so the rationale behind this is to consolidate writing and SPAG work from year 6. So we'll be building on some of the skills that they have learned in years 5 and 6. Students have also just read a substantial fiction text in the graveyard book, and now it's their turn to write. The aim is obviously to encourage students to see reading and writing as two sides of the same coin. So we will look at lots of examples of good writing in the text, and now it's their turn to have a go. The focus: students will practice writing to describe and narrate. They will practice responding to questions with a visual stimulus. So given pictures, and we use those for inspiration. Okay, so what might this look like? So here's an example, and it just gives the students a picture, and it'll give them a couple of choices. So write a description as suggested by this picture, or write a short story based on an animal. And input, you can see there at the bottom where it says 24 marks for content and organisation and 16 marks for technical accuracy. Now these marks and this particular task is actually taken from a practice GCSE paper. So we practice these skills from early on in their school career, as we're practicing them again and again before we get to their GCSEs. And that's where the marks, those 40 marks, come from. Okay, so a snippet then from the writing mark scheme so that you can have a little bit of understanding about this. So whereas the reading that we looked at was looking at assessment objectives 1 and 2, you can see here we've got 5 and 6. So the mark scheme looks slightly different. You can see this snippet says AO5, and AO5 is all about the content in a piece of writing and the organisation. So again, I've taken this from the middle of the mark scheme, and you can just see the title bit explains what AO5, what this means. So to be able to communicate clearly, effectively and imaginatively, selecting and adapting tone, style and register for different forms. So obviously if we're writing a letter at one point, the requirements for that are going to be different to us responding to pictures and writing descriptively, and students need to be able to know when to employ each set of skills. They'll have different purposes, different audiences and so on. And the second part of that is to organise information and ideas, so using structural and grammatical features to support coherence. So what that is saying is, can these students write in paragraphs? And as they become more confident in writing in paragraphs, we begin to manipulate those. Okay, we might use flashbacks, or we might use a circular structure, or there are lots of different ways of manipulating paragraphs. Okay, and that AO5 is 24 out of the 40 marks. Okay, AO6 is all about technical accuracy, so also known as SPAG, so you will have heard that in primary school. So technical accuracy, students must use a range of vocabulary and sentence structures for clarity, purpose and effect, with accurate spelling and punctuation. This requirement must constitute 20% of the marks for each specification as a whole. So we are always looking at their SPAG. Okay, so again from the middle of the mark scheme, level 3, and this one is out of 16 marks. So you can see here what we are looking for as teachers. So sentence demarcation. So put it simply, can they use full stops and question marks and things? And then as they become more confident with punctuation, they might start to use brackets and hyphens and colons and semicolons, etc. And that will allow them to move higher up the mark scheme. Okay, you can see that it says uses a variety of sentence forms for effect. So fronted adverbials is a favourite of everybody, and that's where this features on here, being able to use a variety of sentence structures, beginning those sentences differently, using more complex sentences. Okay, it says we're also looking for generally accurate spelling, including complex and irregular words. This is obviously for level 3. There's increasingly sophisticated use of vocabulary. So there is a huge emphasis on vocabulary in Year 7. We've done a lot of research and a lot of work on how to increase our students' vocabulary. Obviously, reading is one way of doing that, and that's something that we encourage our students to do. But we also embed lots of new vocabulary in our lessons. Okay. in the classroom, obviously, this would look a lot less complicated. Teachers might use some sort of table with success criteria, or it might just be that they're working through some of this individual skills before building up to a piece of writing. Just to give you an example, so we're obviously thinking about writing to describe, so our content is going to reflect that. It would be different if we were writing a formal letter, or if we were writing a piece of argumentative writing, an opinion article. But for a piece of descriptive writing, you're going to find something along the lines of spamos. So spamos would be similes, personification, adjectives, metaphors, onomatopoeia, and use of senses. Obviously, for content, we are also thinking about the purpose and the audience on the mark scheme, but this is what we are looking for from students. So students are aware what they need to include to make their piece successful. In terms of organisation, we would encourage students to have a clear structure, so a beginning, a middle and end. Also, we want our students to be writing in paragraphs. We want our paragraphs to be linking for cohesion, and as I said before, as students become more confident, we can add to this middle column ways of manipulating paragraphs. Okay. In terms of SPAG, these are just some examples. So we're thinking about spelling of basic words. Now, whatever the students in a particular classroom need to be working on will inform what goes in these columns. But it could be spelling of basic words. It might be homophones that students are particularly struggling with. There, and there. It could just be some high frequency words. It might be the spelling's not an issue at all, and instead what we're looking at is more advanced sentence structures, good old fronted adverbials, or you can see in that bottom, just at the bottom there, capital letters, full stops, or higher level punctuation, so like colons and hyphens. Okay, so it's like a three-pronged attack, if you like, looking at this piece of writing. Okay, again, the knowledge organizer. So you can see here, this one, the content and organisation, and things help students with that. So some advice on writing paragraphs. Okay, you've got lots of different language choices. So you can see some of that spamos in there. Structure for that middle column. And so the knowledge organiser will include the things that we want students to be using in their end piece. Okay. Okay, so Spring 2, we look at monologues. Okay, so we're obviously reading poetry and we're looking at monologues. The rationale here is to engage students through powerful characterization. So if you can remember that little symbol on the learning journey at the start, again, we're looking at ways that characterization is built, this time through monologues. To build on and develop students' ability to respond to culturally important texts. To introduce students to the study of poetry at the more advanced level of structure and form. Obviously, this is building on work that they've done in primary, but we're looking at something that is a little bit more advanced now. And we want to culturally enrich our students by introducing them to poems across time written in a historically important form. The focus: students will practice responding to poetry using a suitably critical format and vocabulary. So again, you can see petal there again. Because we're responding to text, we are using the petal structure. So the same skills being revised, practiced, again in a different context. Okay. So the knowledge organizer, you can see it has a lot of information on here, but it does include for our students, again, the petal structure to help them if they come to write up. Lots of language terminology, structural terminology, key themes. So a lot of help, a lot of information in one place. Okay, just a reminder of that snippet of the mark scheme, just to remind us about the need for practicing petal. So giving a point, finding some evidence, PE, we're looking at terminology, the T, understanding the effect on the writer, the methods on the reader, so analysis and linking to the reader, linking to the wider themes or whatever the link is, so petal. Okay, so we are looking at Summer 1, writing non-fiction, language and power, newspapers and the media. Okay, So it's important to note here, obviously students will have looked at the features of a newspaper in primary school. What we tend to do here is to build on those skills, but also some of the really, really important things they need to learn and actually really enjoying this unit is looking at the political spectrum in the UK and how this relates to newspapers, having a look at how bias and different agendas play their part in the different newspapers, comparing newspapers with each other, and teaching students to question the validity of sources, the validity of any of the texts that they read online, and being able to spot fake news. Okay, and the focus here will be writing to inform, to comment and explain. They'll practice planning, producing and editing tabloid or broadsheet newspaper reports too. Okay, go. You can see the knowledge organiser here. So we look at the news triangle. We make sure students understand the difference between broadsheet and tabloid. And that really important left-hand column, newsworthiness and how it's determined. A lot of emphasis is placed on how to spot fake news. Okay. And then finally, in Summer 2, we look at classical literature, so heroes, gods and monsters. Students always tend to enjoy this one. Okay, so the rationale here then. So, classical literature is a key element of our Western literary heritage, and as such, it is important for students to be aware of its influence. It's a key part of students' cultural entitlement. Knowledge of the classics will help students' understanding of the allusions in literature they will read later in their school career. The students have really, really been enjoying learning about some of the different myths, mythology, and we focus on different ones each lesson. It says that the focus students will read a range of poetry and fiction to introduce them to key stories from classical mythology. Starters for our lessons include mythology, which has entered the language. So there's a crossover there with looking at language to increase students' cultural capital. So, for example, the Gordian knot, a Sisyphean task, Herculean task, making sure students understand when those are used in language, a Herculean effort. Do they understand what that means? And the sword of Damocles. Okay. Now, this is the thing, isn't it, that people always worry about. This is what people want to know. How are our children going to be assessed? Now, we've stripped this right back at Key Stage 3, and instead of examining them after every unit of work, more emphasis is placed on teacher marking and feedback within the classroom, making sure that students are getting the kind of instant feedback that they need. And instead, we've moved to an assessment system where we are looking at, they have two main exams in the year. So for Year 7, there's a December examination where they're reading fiction. So at this point, they will have studied the Graveyard Book, and so they will respond to an extract. So all the skills that they've been using, all the skills that they've been practicing, using petal paragraphs, they will respond to an extract. Okay, and then in May, they have a writing exam. So you can see that it says writing fiction and non-fiction. Students will answer one from a choice of 2 writing questions. So they'll be able to choose, as you saw that example earlier, writing to describe or narrate, or writing to inform or explain. So they get a choice of which one they would like to do. Both tasks include a visual stimulus to make it a little bit easier for them. And as you saw on the mark scheme, it's out of 40. Okay, and they get time to plan it and to write it. Okay then. So, just to move into the last kind of section of this presentation, some tips for you to take away, but also to reinforce this message. Now, obviously, I've taken this infographic from the Scottish Book Trust, but obviously it applies to us too. Why read? So you've got loads of reasons there why we should be encouraging students to read. Research proves that reading for pleasure can help us to do all of these things here. If I pull out a couple, feel less lonely and isolated. Okay, reduce symptoms of depression. Obviously improve our social skills, increase our self-esteem and feel more confident. Feel less stressed and anxious. get a better night's sleep. We could all do with that. And obviously get a good job and progress at work. You know, it's students who read succeed, and that is truth. It's not just something that people repetitively say. These are the facts. So this image on the right hand side. So regular reading impacts a child's success at school. If not addressed early, the educational gap widens. So you can see there a child who's reading for 20 minutes per day. Okay, you can see the difference, the amount of literature that student is getting through. And you can see that's 3,600 minutes per school year. And you can see the number of words there. 1,800,000 words per school year. So you can imagine the vocabulary that child feels confident to use in their own work. If child B is only reading for 5 minutes per day, we're talking about 900 minutes per school year. Okay, a lot less words. And then obviously child C, if they're only reading for 1 minute per day, 180 minutes per school year, 8,000 words per school year. So the gap between those students increases year on year. And you can see just the bottom there, obviously this is scored in percentile. This student here scores in the 90th percentile. This student in the 50th and this student in the 10th. Okay, so we can't impress anyone enough really that this is the way to help them, to encourage them to read. So a few tips then on that. So what can you do to support reading for pleasure? Build a home library if you haven't got one already. Children who have books of their own enjoy reading more and read more frequently. Okay. Literacy targeted rewards such as books or book vouchers have been found to be more effective in developing reading motivation than rewards that are unrelated to the activity. This one, number 3, is so important, especially for, we're talking about older students here. Give them a choice. They don't have to sit there with, a paperback book in their hands. I prefer that, but they don't have to. They can be reading anything. They can be reading newspaper articles. They can be reading. As long as they're reading, they're going to be making progress. Obviously, it's ideal if they like reading fiction, extended fiction, but as long as they're reading something, that's better than nothing. And be a role model. Students' relationships with reading can be influenced by the relationship teachers and parents have with books. So be seen reading. Be seen to value it yourself. Okay, so again, more tips for specifically, because we're obviously talking about older children. So let them have a say in the books that you read. Use the books as conversation starters. Okay, so reading aloud is a wonderful way to bridge discussions on topics that you may not know how to bring up. So as kids get older, you can choose material that leads into conversations about relationships, choices, religion, intimacy, addictions, abuse, and other relevant subjects. Okay, number 3 there, allow the books to lead to other learning. So if you're reading a book and, your child comes up with questions about it, set the book down, go and find out, look on Google, look it up somewhere. And everybody has access these days at their fingertips. This helps to bring text to life, gives them relevance. So number 4, ensure that the reading time is a positive one. If you're relaxed and the experience is positive, it will only further your child's interest in books. Number 5 is fairly obvious. If you can create a relaxing environment, sit under a tree or on a blanket on a warm day. It says cuddle up in bed under the covers, pile on the couch. Yeah, anything like that is going to create a positive feeling around reading. And something else somebody said not that long ago is that they like to read books aloud just to the kids while they play, while they do something else. And we're talking about year 7 students. They still like Lego. They still like doing that. If they're doing something, read them while they're doing that. They will listen. Okay, number 6, use audiobooks some of the time. So many good audiobooks out there. And again, just let them see your enthusiasm. Choose books that you love. Talk about the magic of being swept away by a particular book, something that you love. Okay. Firstly, it's always great if you can ensure there are opportunities to write at home. So whether that's encouraging children to get involved in short story competitions, or writing to members of your family, or any pen pals, anything, writing postcards. But if you give them opportunities to write, they're going to be practicing. Again, help them practice planning and structuring their writing. Use mind maps and diagrams. Encourage them to share their writing with you. Be their audience. Read their work out loud with them to help them spot errors in their sentence grammar. Try and encourage them to write different genres. So it might be that you're encouraging them to write poetry or letters, plays even. Get them to explain why they have made certain word choices in their writing. So again, it's going hand in hand with the analysis work that they will do, looking at why authors use particular techniques and words. And obviously use reading to support writing. I also wanted to share this because I think it's really, really important that we're encouraging them to think. And this is a really easy way to kind of challenge them and get them thinking just without any resources available, to be in conversation. So what you've got in front of you here is the question matrix. And this arrow here says deeper thinking. So really, if we want students to think on a deeper level, if you want to get your children to think on a deeper level, you need to ask them more probing questions. So rather than just asking what is, we're just going to get a quick response. You want to start thinking about how might. Okay, so how might something work? How might this character be feeling? How might, and it doesn't necessarily have to just be used if you're talking about books. It can be a program that you're watching together. You might ask, oh, how might they be feeling now? How might they have dealt with this situation differently? Okay, and it's about using those questions to open up thought. So for getting them to think what the answer could be, and there's no real right or wrong answer. Okay, and that's all from me. Thank you ever so much for listening. Thank you. Bye.
Well, that concludes our Achieve and Succeed event. I really hope you found it useful. What I would like is if you would complete the evaluation form that's been sent out to you via email. This would help us in the process of planning future events. Thanks ever so much. Bye-bye.